Hey guys, it's Ethan from Zimmer Labs. I'm here to do a relatively quick video today of a recent build. These are the Teensysaber Rebels Asoka Lightsabers. This is the Shoto, this is the Shien. Obviously, it's just the shorter guy. They're modeled on the concept of katana blades. So any of you ninja lovers out there, I don't know anyone who really isn't a ninja lover, these might be right up your alley. But they're cool, they're different, you know. It's not a Graflex, it's not an Obi-Wan, it's not an MK1, it's not your everyday lightsaber. They work the same way, but they look totally different, and it's a nice twist. These are for a very good customer of mine, Ronnie. I hope you like them. This is probably a surprise to you. I hadn't even mentioned that I was getting these started, but I had some extra time and I wanted to get them knocked out for you. So let's dive in. They each have, obviously, their own blade. What I did was I made the two blades slightly different lengths, proportional to the hilts. So the shorter blade is for the shorter saber, and they just slide right in here. Doesn't look like there's going to be a whole lot of stability going on, but there is. The way these are designed and machined, they're real clean, they're real tight, so all you have to do is torque down this set screw right here, and this blade's not going anywhere. It doesn't wiggle, it doesn't move, it's great. These are set up so that they can take 1" or 7/8 inch blades. My preference is to go with the 7/8 blade. I think they look better, they're lighter, they're less awkward, and the weighting of the saber, the balance of the saber is better because the 1" blade, 1" blades are really significantly heavier than the 7/8, so the feel is much better with a lighter blade. So let's go ahead and lock these in, and I'll show you guys how they work. Easy as that. Now displaying these with the blades in is a little tricky just because of the shape. I think I'm going to have my display stand guy design a specific custom stand specifically made for these, because there's no stand that I've seen yet that houses these really well. The best that I can do so far is this Hasbro Force FX stand for the removable blade sabers that has the two supports that have two slots each, one for the blade, one for the hilt. But they hold the two hilts great without the blades. With the blades, it works, as you can see, but not real well. Now, what we did was to make them really, really similar, but not quite identical as far as the setup goes. So they both have kill keys on the outside. They both have boot up sounds similar but slightly different. They both have their auxiliary buttons on the bottom on the underside at the top, and the activation buttons on the bottom on the underside at the middle. Basically, what I did was I held them in my hand and just felt if I were swinging this around and holding it, this is how I would hold it right here. This is the most natural grip. So auxiliary button goes right under here, activation button goes right here. If you have a bigger hand, you might be using this finger instead of the small finger, but it's definitely the most natural place for them. Of course, you guys know me, I put Neopixels in everything. I'm a big fan of string blades. And again, if I was holding this like this, if I was swinging around, this is how I'd hold it. So I put activation button right under this finger. be good if it worked. So we got twin Asoka Rebel Katana lightsabers right here. Pretty badass. Functionally, they have Teensysabers and Neopixels, so they would work the way you would expect. Blaster blocks. Blade lock up. And then toggling blade presets is the auxiliary button again, so tap it, get to the next blade color. I did green, then blue, then a nice pulsing gold. This is a blood orange, one of my favorites. This is ice blue with a crazy pulse to it. This guy is just red. Kind of hard to tell, but that's because the green blade underneath is on. Shut that off, and that's a little clearer now. This is the audio flicker blade that's yellow-white with a blue flash on clash. This is an aqua pulsing blade. Strobe blade. My patented Tron blade, and by patented I mean not patented at all. We have actually tweaked the settings on this guy so that it has more effects now. It's not just a cool blade anymore. It doesn't do blaster blocks because that just was too messy. Does obviously has the sound effects, but it does do blade lockup, so. And I'm sure in the near future we'll get blaster blocks working. It's the same blade but in blue. The unicorn blade. Works really well with the calibrate font. And obviously the length of the startup and shutdown is really long, but that could be tweaked to however you like it. I just like to kind of accentuate how ridiculous that blade is by making it take forever. This is a green fire blade, which looks absolutely fantastic on the Asoka saber. It's just perfect for it. Blue next. Then, of course, red. This is the rainbow blade. POV blade. Battery indicator blade. And back to the beginning. Now both of these guys are set up the exact same way as far as the blade presets go. Well, if you guys watch in the background at the monitor here, you can see what the blaster block effect looks like. It kind of hits a spot in the blade and then ripples out in the plasma of the blade itself. But the shot of the blaster hits a certain spot, which is randomized. So that one hit up here, that one hit up here, that one hit up here again, up there. Now, that's all well and good, but let me show you the inside, because that's where these guys really got a bit more fun. I'm going to take the blade off, just because it's easier to work with. As I think I already showed you guys, it's a TCSS Neopixel blade connector system. Fit quite nicely in here. You just have to take a little bit of the PCB material off around the edge, and then it's a perfect fit. You can use sandpaper, a bench grinder. I used a Dremel. Alright, we'll start with this guy. So, to get these guys open, they're not really difficult. You start here, simply twist and remove this little fellow, this greeble, if you will. Then over here, this is like, it looks like a CoverTech knob to me. I think maybe it's intended to be, but I'm not sure, because it's not exactly a CoverTech shape. But it's likely you could use that as a CoverTech knob to hang this on a belt. So you unscrew that one, and then one more screw to unscrew here, which is a quick one. This whole piece comes off, then this guy comes off. So you're looking at this fellow right here. Once you take off the side plate, you are looking at the chassis and all the goodness inside. Let me refocus for you guys real quick. Get a nice up close shot of this. Now, typically I do a metallic finish on chassis, but this just really was screaming, hey, I'm a Ferrari, so I thought, why not put a really nice paint finish on it like you'd see on a Ferrari. So this is a white pearl, what's the word I'm looking for? It's essentially a car paint, but it's a white pearl finish with multiple coats of clear coat. Then a gold crystal chamber and brass. The kill key on this one's on the back side, so when you remove the side plate it doesn't affect the inner workings of the electronics. You've got a 20mm bass speaker. You've got wiring here which is exposed, but what I did was I put it in shrink wrap tubing and then painted that shrink wrap tubing the same white pearl color to match everything else, so it doesn't really stand out. This section here houses the momentary switch. The other momentary switch is here, which I had to carve some of this chassis out to get the momentary switch installed, and then put a plunger here that hits it. That's not part of the design of this chassis. That was something I had to do extra, but really it was a better option than just putting a second one right here. The way this is designed is to have two buttons right here, and literally one goes in this part, one goes in this part. So they're so close together you couldn't possibly, if you had sausage fingers like I do, you couldn't possibly hit one or the other. You'd be hitting both all the time. So I didn't want to do that to Ronnie. In this guy, I did a rose quartz crystal, because let's face it, Ahsoka's a girl, or a woman. She's a badass Jedi, but she's still a woman. So the white pearl, the gold, and the rose quartz, these things just pop. It's absolutely perfect. The crystal chamber mimics the blade, so whatever the blade would be doing, that crystal's doing. The power supply is lithium, of course. This is an 18500, which is the absolute biggest thing you can fit in this. What I did was buy a Panasonic battery, and then I stripped off the green protective wrap, because, let's face it, that looked terrible with this setup. So I put a clear wrap over it, so you'd have a nice shiny silver battery, so the whole motif works really well together. Pop the blade in. guys can see the whole thing. Now, with these guys, like I said, I did do 2 different size blades, but because everything's identical, if you want to switch one blade around on either hilt, that's fine. They're both totally interchangeable. So the short hilt can have the longer blade, the Shoto can be long or it can be short, the Shien can be long or short. It's a little bit more options that way. And as far as displaying goes, if these were mine and they were going on display in my place, I would be displaying them open like this, because this is just, it's really awesome looking. It absolutely is. It's a beautiful thing. The whole hilt, the whole surface, the whole finish of every part of this is really, really fresh. It's really shiny. It's really clean. So you want to just kind of show the whole thing off. I mean, sure, it looks nice with the cover on, but what looks better if I was putting these on display? I mean, is that even a question? No, definitely not. Now, the tricky part with this build is this big guy. And that is very simply because the recharge port is part of the wall, the outer wall that you take off to access the crystal chamber here. Let's just drop that. So you unscrew the greeble again. You can unscrew this guy, but you don't have, well, you do have to, because there is another little tiny Allen screw here, but I already took it off. So, for my purposes, I don't have to unscrew this guy. And actually, before I get past this, here's a trick for everybody. Anyone who's building these themselves, this part and this little greeble part here, when you screw it on, they're metal. So I only took it off and put it on one time, and it already made a small ring. It's not super noticeable, but if you did it more than once, 2, 3, 4 times, you'd have a huge gouge right here. So what I did was clear Gorilla Tape on the back side of this piece, as well as the back side of this piece. You really can't even see it. The front side, no tape. The back side, tape. But that puts a nice thin protective layer between the metal pieces, so when you're screwing and unscrewing things from the hilt, you're not damaging the surface, which is kind of important. So now, this guy works the same way. You want to pop off the sidewall here, and when you do that, like I said, there's your recharge port, comes right off, which means that this guy is not going to work, it's not going to function without your side plate, unless you get creative. So what I did was build a custom connector, which you can see is the 3-pronged black and gold circles in there, black and silver maybe. Those line up with the 3 prongs on this recharge port. So when you put it in, this guy simply sets down right in there, and then you just pop it in, and that reconnects them. Take it off, and you don't have to worry about wires. I mean, I could have just wired it up so that you could pop this off and there would be enough wires that you could kind of have this over on the side with the wires connecting it, but that just looks terrible, let's face it. But what that also means is that when you do that and you take that off, then this recharge port / kill key no longer has any connections, meaning no power is getting to your sound card. So you've got to install an additional switch, which is right here, this little tiny guy. And you'll notice that I flick that switch, and we've got power again. So now you can display this wide open, no wires, no side plate, nothing ugly to get in the way. But it took a little thinking, and it was a little tricky. The interior on this guy, very similar to this guy. Both have a nice white pearl paint color. Both have gold and rose quartz. Both have brass rod accents. Both work the same way. Both have the wires disguised in heat shrink tubing that is painted to match the rest of the chassis. And both look awesome. Really just gorgeous. Gorgeous presentation on these sabers. I give the guys at KR a lot of credit, as well as Goth for designing some really, really fantastic chassis. As far as building them goes, everything works great except the stuff that I've already noted you have to get a little tricky with. And then the other thing is that these chassis, they take up the entire space in here, and if you have any extra anything or anything even remotely out of place, the covers, when you go to put them on, will not sit flush because the chassis sticks out this way and it abuts the side cover, so this will not slide in. And that also means that when you put it on, it's going to scratch whatever finish you've got going on here, and it's going to hit this speaker as the speaker's vibrating against it. So you have to be incredibly careful to make sure that these are installed perfectly and really sit all the way in there and are flush. So you can tell, and if you look at it right here, here is the ledge where the cover sits, and the chassis is right up to it. In fact, it's just barely past that lip. So if you have a wire's length underneath here pushing this up, even the thickness of a wire is going to make this not work at all. So you got to be extremely careful when you do these. Or the other option would be to, on the back side of these chassis components, just cut them down, shave them down. You could put them on a belt sander and just flatten them out and lower them down, take a whole bunch of material off the back. Maybe use an X-Acto knife and just slice them away. But I didn't want to do that. I try to avoid cutting chassis away as much as possible because, they're designed the way they're designed on purpose. You don't want to weaken them by taking structural parts away. You don't want to make things thinner than they have to be. You don't want them to end up being too small so they rattle around and they're loose. You want to try to leave them exactly as they were designed. One thing I did seriously tweak was this back section of the chassis here. This piece used to fill this whole back section, but for obvious reasons I had to cut some of it away to get the switch and the connector installed in there. But it looks great the way it is. The bits that I cut away, I cut them right in the seams so you can't tell they're missing, and they really didn't serve any purpose. They were just aesthetic, and I think this thing looks really cool the way it is anyhow. Give you guys a nice close-up look at the finish, the paint, brass rods and everything. This is like 6 or 7 coats of paint and primer and clear coat, maybe 8 even, but important if you want it to be smooth. If you guys have done any work with Shapeways plastic, you know that this stuff is anything but smooth when you get it. It's either white or black or whatever, and it looks like the thing is covered in chicken pox or something. It's a joke. The best thing to do is to lightly sand the top, but the more you sand it, the more you just make it hairy and fibrous because it's plastic, so it doesn't sand really well. So I like to use some Tamiya putty to fill the lumps in, and a file and a really incredibly sharp razor or X-Acto blade to kind of cut away the lumps. Like when you're working with all these channels and grooves here, the best thing to do is take a razor blade and just cut along all the surface lines. You have to be incredibly careful to keep the lines and the contours the same way they are, but it's easier to cut away the bumps than it is to try to sand them away. And then once you get enough coats of paint on there, whatever bumps you're left with the Tamiya putty, the primer, and all the coats of paint, and then the clear coat, that pretty well gets rid of the rest of the bumps. even still, these aren't perfect. Like, the finish on this gold piece here is perfect. The finish on the plastic, quite good, but not as good as the gold. And in case you guys were wondering, as usual, I definitely went with the Teensysaber electronics in this. It's an incredibly tight fit, but the electronics sit behind this section. So you have your speaker here, then the electronics directly behind that. Then your accent lighting for the crystal goes on the wall of this section, and the crystal slides in. If you need to access the SD or the USB, you would literally just grab right here and slide this whole thing up. It swivels right up. It swivels on this circular bit, but the whole thing slides out, and the USB and SD card are sitting right there at the back. So you can plug right into it or pull the SD card out if you need to. That being said, I wouldn't recommend accessing the SD or the USB on this any more than you need to, because it's just a tight fit. Everything sits exactly where it needs to sit so that you can close it and everything works correctly. But if you pop it open, chances are something might move just a hair, and that's enough that the covers may not sit perfectly flush again. They are really finicky sabers. They're beautiful. If they're done right, you're fine, but it'd be easy to knock them out of whack if you start messing around with them too much. But I tried to take that into account when I built them to make it so you don't have to access anything unless you absolutely need to, because you've got your switch here, removable connector for the recharge system, so everything, is user-friendly, as user-friendly as I could possibly make it. The last thing to say is that, like I said, these are set up for 1 inch or 7/8. They include these metal blade rings, which are adapters. They can be installed so they're permanently in the hilt, and then the blade slides in, or they can be installed to the blade, which I like to do, because I think it looks better without them. Plus, when you screw in the set screw is going into the metal, and that makes for an incredibly good lock, whereas if you're putting these in permanently, then you have to drill a hole, and then the set screw goes into the blade, which is not as good of a lock. It's going to damage the blade every time you do it, and eventually it's not going to sit real tight. So this is my method of choice as far as working with this kind of thing goes. You can see little tiny circles here where the set screw meets it, but that is never going to cause a problem because you don't have to screw it all that tight to make it work. Just tight enough that it catches. And you're never going to have a situation where it damages that metal ring to a point where it doesn't work as intended. This sound font has really quiet swing sounds. Almost sounds like it's not doing anything. But it is. But these guys are really cool when you have them wide open but turned on with the blade. And that's just a cool look right there. It's a shame you can't just leave them like this all the time. I guess you could put a clear plastic shield over this and leave them like this 24/7. That'd be pretty sweet, but I think probably the better solution is to display them like this. Pretty sweet display right there. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Let me give you just some updates on what you can expect next. I've got a couple of the videos I'm going to be doing right now, so there's some more stuff that's already finished, but coming up we are doing a Mentor Graflex build for Derek. It is going to be Teensysaber Neopixels, and this one's going to blow everyone's socks off because this is definitely one of the nicer Graflex builds on the market these days. Incredibly intricate, incredibly expensive to print. Just to print the parts you need for this guy, not including electronics, not including the hilt, not including the blade or the battery, any of that stuff. To print it in metals that I like to work with, you're looking at $1,350. But hey, you know what? If you want to have an incredibly nice Graflex, you got to spend some money on it, and it's going to last you your entire life. And when it's done, if you get sick of it, you could probably sell it for twice what you paid for it, because the thing is going to be incredibly valuable. That's coming in probably a month. Let's see. Before that, I would expect probably this guy here is coming. This is a Obi-Wan TPM Phantom Menace with a crystal chamber, and then we've got the new Corbanth LS6 Gull Wing sabers. I just got my shipment of those in. I've got 5 of them. 2 or 3 of them are already earmarked and sold, but this is what's going in them. The way it works is there's 2 doors on the bottom that swing open on hinges and magnetically close. This is the crystal chamber that you'll see when you open the doors. The hilt also twist slides open and then twist slide closed, but if you do that, you're going to get access to recharge, kill switch, and battery, but there's not going to be any crystal chamber in that portion. After that, we've got the other Asoka set, also for Ronnie. This is the Old Republic. The Old Republic, it's not the Old Republic. It's the other. It's not Rebels. It's well, you guys know what I'm talking about. Obviously, I don't. But it's the other set of Asoka sabers. Got these from Solo's Hold. That's what they look like at the moment. I'm just finishing, waiting for them to be done being polished, and then I will probably start building those. And then, lastly, after that, there's a bunch of other stuff after that, but after that, of note, Rudy Pando's crystal chambers are, fingers crossed, done. And I've got 5 or 10 of those coming in, I can't remember, but a couple of those are already sold, but I do have a couple extras, so if anyone wants an MK1 with a full, insane Rudy Pando crystal chamber, all metal, all gold, rhodium, really nice quartz crystals, let me know. Those are going to be fantastic, and they may be here tomorrow. They may be here today. I don't even know, but they're ready, and the hilts are ready, and we're going to put Teensysabers in those too. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Holler if you have any questions, and as always, thanks very much.